verse 673. By clinging to the three Svabhavas, perceived or grasped, and perceiving or grasping are manifested. The simple-minded discriminate objects as belonging to the world and to the superworld. Prior to this verse, we had a full-on assault on the habit energy of our moods. And this was connected with the realization of the subjective nature of reality. There is actually only subjectivity. Subjective and objective are normally taken as a pair, two ways of looking at the same thing, a duality even. But unlike other dualities, like heat or cold, tall, short, they are not relative to each other. There's no continuity. They're not part of the same continuum, like heat and cold, tall and short, light and heavy, light and dark, and so on. There's no point where the objective becomes subjective, and this seems to be something that is ignored. At what point does the objective description of the colour red as a particular frequency become the experience of the colour red? There's no continuity. We can see where the colour red might be triggered by a certain wavelength of light on a certain part of the brain. But they're quite separate things. The subjective and objective are a correspondence rather than two poles of the same continuum. And in the previous video I described the objective as like making a map. Maps are incredibly useful. Or models, make a model. Models are very useful. And in fact you can get by just by looking at the model. Then you forget what it's a model of. You forget the terrain. So the objective model is a construction. It's a fabrication. Reality, consciousness, whatever, is subjective. And once you realise this, once you realise the full import of this, then the habit energy of your moods is demolished, because that habit energy is fueled by objective understanding. It's like looking at a map and getting a bit depressed because you see all these contours are close together, which means it's going to be a steep climb. But then if you actually look at the hill and you look at the wildlife and the foliage and the blue skies with the clouds in them and the sun shining, what's there to be depressed about? But you look at the map and you see these contours close together and you get depressed. This is a bit how it is. So once we realise that everything is subjective, well, it's like being in a lucid dream. You can decide to be as happy and as ecstatic and as blissful as you want to be. There is nothing to weigh you down. You are completely free. So I've been putting this into practice, and I've talked about my habit energy and about my moods and about my fundamental tone, which takes a rather dismal outlook. And whenever it's reared its head, it's just dissolved into a giggle. It's dissolved into a giggle. Now there might be other reasons for this. I've had a very nice holiday in Cyprus. It's spring here in England where I live. The spring flowers are out and we're getting some lovely sunny afternoons. My body, which I've been having a lot of problems with over the last year or so, seems to be getting better. Not quite there. I've still got mobility issues. There seems to be still elements of distress in my body which affect me emotionally, but that can be sorted with some medication. I notice it comes up now and again, this dreadful welling of distress, which I think is a physiological thing. So it's perfectly reasonable to take medication for it. So when I notice it coming on, or if I'm in the throes of it, then some cocotamol seems to help dissolve that. So spiritually though, this brings up a new challenge, because my fundamental mood tone gives me an area of work, gives me something to work against. And if everything's going quite well and life is good, where does that leave you spiritually? I'm sure things will still provide a challenge though. I've still got this night shift job to deal with. But never mind all that for now. Let's come back to this verse, because this verse is referring to when we're not practicing once again. So in a way it's appropriate that this verse comes in now. You've had some successful practice, things are going well. So what happens now? Do you forget about practicing? What happens now is that, yes, you do forget to practice, but you haven't completely forgotten it. You still remember that there is such a thing as spiritual practice, even though you've lost your way. But you remember it on a conceptual level. And this is what we come back to. We're remembering spiritual practice on the conceptual level of the three Svabhavas. And the Svabhavas had a video of their own, which was video number 30. Now, clinging to the three Svabhavas means that the attention is being hijacked here and there once again, and we're caught up in wherever the attention leads us. And it's a bit strange that the three Svabhavas are mentioned here, not two, because one of the Svabhavas is actually perfect knowledge. Now, Svabhava is translated as self-nature, and in Buddhism, one of the core teachings is that there is no self-nature. So it's quite strange to have this term self-nature. But our attention is drawn to the story of an objective world in the belief that it has its own self-nature, that it is something which has substance. This is one of the Svabhavas. Objective reality, which isn't reality at all, but we're focused on it because we believe it's important and it does have its own reality. And this is particularly emphasized in scientific understanding. Somehow we accept that scientific understanding is more real than our own subjective understanding, because it allows us to develop technology and it gives us more control over our environment. So So this is the measure by which we give scientific understanding more credence. This is actually the self or the substance of scientific understanding, but it's really no substance at all. The other understanding is the understanding of our beliefs and our ideas, our inner understanding, our mental and emotional understanding. This is our own take on the world, which we believe has substance, but it doesn't. So this is what we get caught up in again. And in particular, if you're a spiritual practitioner, you get caught up in ideas of spirituality. And this is a bit disastrous. And this is what I'm going to take as what's meant by the superworld. The simple-minded discriminate objects as belonging to the world and to the superworld. So I'm going to understand superworld as the world of spirituality. So the simple-minded refers to when we're not practicing. We're just going along with things. We might be thinking about things. We might be striving after something better. We might be striving after spiritual understanding. But all of this is not practice. So by clinging to the three Svabhavas, it's not a conscious thing. It's simply the attention which is clinging. It's clinging to what is referred to by the term Svabhava. It's clinging to the belief in a substantial external world. It's clinging to the belief in our own understanding and our own desire for understanding. And it's clinging to our belief in spiritual structures. This is the clinging to the three Svabhavas. Verse 674 continues this theme. From the viewpoint of relativity, the notion of Svabhava has been upheld, but in order to ward off one-sided views, the Svabhava is not to be discriminated. This teaching of the Svabhavas is quite useful for appreciating our everyday limited understanding. The two Svabhavas are a bit like the two poles of a magnet. There's me here with my own understanding. There's the world there with conventional or objective understanding. And there's a dynamic between the two. And we're caught up in this. This is what limits us. We're limited by this belief in objective notions. One-sided views are beliefs in reality. And they limit us. They limit us. They limit us in terms of our emotional well-being. They might be quite useful or functional up to a point, but at a certain point we must drop them, because what's going on underneath it all is that our limiting moods, the habit pattern of our moods, is being fueled by understandings. So we drop this. We stop taking our cue from the objective world. We stop taking our cue from our moods. We come back to the realization of the subjective nature of everything. And in this we've got freedom. We've got freedom from the Svabhavas. In a way, this is actually the third Svabhava. This is parinishpana, which is perfect knowledge. But we don't need to bother with labels anymore at this point. We don't need to bother about the teachings. When we come back to the realization of the subjective nature of everything, then we can be at peace. There's peace and stillness here. Nothing need disturb us. Everything is blown wide open. We are free from the mind. Personal psychology has been transcended